Good evening, everyone. Am I audible and visible? Good evening, everyone. Am I audible and visible? I can hear myself. Yes, great. Okay, so let's start off with COP27, part 2. And yeah, so there are two things: Coalition of Disaster Resilience and Infrastructure, and International Solar Alliance, which we will deal with tomorrow. Apart from that, we are going to do the rest of the things. Now, this is not just related to COP27, it is also related to certain institutions that are possibly related to the Conference on Parties. And so, hence, we are going to do it like that. So before we go on to whatever happened in COP27, this is also very, very important for us. So this is United Nations Environment Program. So they had released this particular report called the Emissions Gap Report of 2022, the closing window, climate crisis calls for rapid transformation of societies. Good evening everyone. सो ये वाला हमारे को थीम बहुत ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट हो गया, ठीक है. दिस थीम इज इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर अस नाउ अकॉर्डिंग टू दिस पर्टिकुलर रिपोर्ट व्हिच वाज taken out in 2022. The top 7 emitters of this world are, so first is China, second is the 27 members of the European Union, and third is India, Indonesia, Brazil, Russian Federation, and the United States of America. So according to this, good evening. अच्छा, सो अब ये टॉप 7 एमिटर्स जो हैं प्लस जो हमारा इंटरनेशनल ट्रांसपोर्ट है, राइट, एरोप्लेन्स के बारे में बात कर ले या फिर रेलवेज के बारे में बात कर ले, जो भी हमारा इंटरनेशनल ट्रांसपोर्ट है, प्लस दीज टॉप 7 emitting countries, they account to 55% of the global greenhouse gas emissions that took place in 2020. राइट, गुड इवनिंग बेटा. कितनी बार गुड इवनिंग लिखोगे उसको थोड़ा सा रोक दो, है ना. So top 7 emitting countries and international transport, this is accounting for 55% of the greenhouse gas emissions. Collectively, they say the G20 members, जिसकी presidency अब इंडिया के पास होएगी, are responsible for 75% of the global greenhouse gases emissions. See, these facts you can learn because anyway, United Nations Environment Program is very, very important. Now, the global average per capita greenhouse gases emissions was 6.3 tons of CO2 equivalent in 2020. So, pehle we were talking about the amount of emission. Now we are talking about the per capita emission. अब अगर पर कैपिटा एमिशन के बारे में बात करें तो सबसे ज्यादा पर कैपिटा एमिशन यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स ऑफ अमेरिका में है. एंड अगर यहाँ पे इंडिया की बात करें तो पर कैपिटा एमिशन इज 2.4%. So that basically means that we are amongst the top 3. In fact, we are the third largest emitters as per this particular report. But per capita अगर हम लोग बात करें तो हमारा 2.4 times है. Per capita में यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स ऑफ अमेरिका, थैंक यू उत्कर्ष. सो पर कैपिटा में अगर हम यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स ऑफ अमेरिका के बारे में बात करें तो वो काफी ज्यादा है, और इंडिया की अगर बात करें तो इट इज 2.4 times. नाउ फॉर मोस्ट मेजर एमिटर्स इंक्लूडिंग चाइना, इंडिया, रशियन फेडरेशन, ब्राजील, इंडोनेशिया, द ग्रीन हाउस गैसेज एमिशंस rebounded in 2021 and we exceeded the pre-pandemic level. So पैंडेमिक से पहले जितना हमारे ग्रीन हाउस गैसेज एमिशंस हो रही थी, after that, we have bounced back and it is not a very good thing for us, and we have started emitting a lot of greenhouse gases. So that is bad for India. But apart from that, per capita के sense में अगर हम बात करें तो इंडिया का 2.4 है, जहाँ पे यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स ऑफ अमेरिका per capita पे अगर बात करें तो they are going up till the 14 times, right? So that is a lot. Now, apart from that, the nationally determined contributions, they were estimated to reduce the global emissions in 2030 by 5 and 10%, right? And if we have to actually go on to the levels that we have promised in the Paris Climate Change Agreement, wherein we are limiting our global warming to at least 2 degrees Celsius, or 1.5 is like an ideal condition, then our emissions should be around, the reduction in the global emission should be around 30% and 45%. So our very first homework becomes, what are these unconditional and conditional nationally determined contributions? So ये conditional कौन सी वाली है और unconditional कौन सी वाली है, this is what we are going to read about. Apart from that, like I just told you, even in the previous session that we had taken, that we are going to complete this entire topic, which is not going to happen even today. We are going to complete it tomorrow, and we will do something else also tomorrow. But kindly keep all of this in mind, and then we will take a test on it from, I mean, just a very basic test on it the next time that we meet, which will be tomorrow. Now the government pledge, जो भी सारी के सारी governments ने pledge किया है कि अच्छा यार इतना हम लोग emission अपना कम करने की कोशिश करेंगे, but according to the United Nations Environment Program, they say this is absolutely inadequate. You know, if you just keep going at the same pace, then the average increase in temperature would be 2.8 degrees Celsius, which is not at all good for our entire world, right? So additional commitments since COP26 removed the 0.5 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalents, which is less than 1% of the estimated global emissions. So we need to take it forward. We need to reduce it even further. We need to start utilizing more renewable sources of energy. Now, global emissions in 2030 are estimated at a 58 per capita carbon emission. And the gap is a lot. And so hence we need to work even more is what the UNEP is saying. Now, with respect to the United Nations Environment Program, now this becomes very important because this organization has completed 50 years. So we will talk about certain things which are very important from our country's perspective. Now, the very first thing is, of course, agar 50 saal complete hue hain, to it was founded in 1972 following the landmark UN Conference on the Human Environment. Right, this was conceived and it has worked very closely with its 193 member countries, and they have paved the way to around 15 multilateral environment agreements. We are not going to deal with each and every multilateral environmental agreements, but we are going to talk about the ones that are very, very important from our examination perspective. Apart from that, everybody is aware of this, that our Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was the only foreign head of the government out of the 113 nations who had attended this particular UN conference on human environment, and is why we've also put her photo. And she had, because at that time in our country, there was a lot of problem with respect to poverty. And if you remember the 1971 elections that she had stood for, her campaign was Garibi Hatao. So what she did in this particular conference was she linked environmental conservation with poverty reduction, which is one of the key principles of the Sustainable Development Goals, right? Head is Inga Anderson, is absolutely right. So if we talk about the United Nations Environment Program, now 1968 May, UN Secretary General U Thant, he had delivered a report talking about the activities of United Nations organization and program relevant to human environment. And this report is also called the UN Conference on Human Environment. Now, eventually, because of this particular report, because of the fact that he said, you know, whatever we are doing right now, it is going to endanger our earth in the future, then that's when a lot of countries realized that, no, we need to come together and we need to do something about it. And so in 1972, this particular meeting was held in Stockholm in Sweden, and it was a landmark conference which led to the formation of the United Nations Environment Program. In 1972, Maurice Strong was elected as the first head of the United Nations Environment Program, and very rightly said, Inga Anderson is the one who is heading this particular program as of today. 1973 May, Kenya's first president, he inaugurated the United Nations Environment Headquarters at Kenyatta International Convention Center. And so since then, this particular, Nairobi mein ye jo jagah hai, it is basically an outskirts of Nairobi. It is an old coffee farm, which is basically the headquarters of UNEP as of today. 1973 की अगर हम बात करें, तो the leaders had signed a convention for the prevention of pollution from ships. You see, we are talking so much about maritime conservation and biodiversity today. So back in 1973, this particular convention is called MAPOL, and this treaty was administered by the International Maritime Organization, which basically spoke about strict rules with respect to the shipping industries and how to prevent spills and how to prevent pollution from this thing. Now, 1973 mein hi, we had signed a convention called Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. So this was also added. This is also one of the feathers in the cap of UNEP, where we spoke about, trade of more than 38,000 animals and plants, and how, these are planet's most endangered species and we need to stop it. 1973 की अगर बात करें तो हमारा पहला वर्ल्ड एनवायरमेंटल डे was organized by UNEP on 5th June with the theme Only One Earth. We've already spoken about it before. 1974 Regional Seas Program was established. India is a part of it. And this is described as one of the crown jewels of the environment diplomacy, जहाँ पे बहुत सारे countries, they came together and they said, we are going to stop ocean pollution and we are going to protect marine life. And today, more than 143, when will we do the animals class? We will do the animals class. Let's do it like possibly tomorrow or the next session after that. We'll do that, okay? So today, more than 143 states participate in this particular regional seas program, wherein we are talking about marine biodiversity ka conservation. Then is migratory species ki baat kare, to also known as the Bonn Convention. India is also part of it since 1983. And you see, they're talking about migratory animals and their habitats and how to protect these animals. 1979 में फिर हमने एक convention sign किया on long range transboundary air pollution. And we were talking about acid rain in this particular convention, and it has really helped. This treaty has really drastically reduced the chemicals, including sulfur and nitrogen oxide, which is hanging over cities, because of which acid rain takes place. Then in 1980, the World Conservation Strategy was launched by UNEP, and this document is amongst the first to define the concept of sustainable development, जिसके बारे में आज की डेट पे UNGA is talking about it, and we are all working towards the sustainable development goals. The first document to actually talk about the concept of sustainable development was the World Conservation Strategy, which was launched in 1980 by United Nations Environment Program. This is a strategy partnership between UNEP, International IUCN का नाम आपने सुना हुआ है, and also the World Wildlife Fund. Then is 1981. The UN General Assembly designates the 1980s as the International Drinking Water Supply and Sanitation Decade, where clean water was spoken about. And they said, this is a very, very precious resource and it needs to be taken care of. And water-related issues are a core part of United Nations Environment Program's work today. And we are fighting water pollution and everything related to that. And this was started off in 1980. And you can just keep this in mind that the United Nations General Assembly has stated that the 1980s is the era of international drinking water supply and sanitation. Then is 1985, the states signed the Vienna Convention for the protection of ozone layer. This is the first convention to be ratified by every country, and it provides a framework for all talk about the root causes of ozone layer depletion. And they just said, this particular Vienna Convention just said, you share this information, but when should you start acting upon it? This particular thing came with the Montreal Protocol in 1987. So in 1985 we said share your information. In 1987 in the Montreal Protocol we said start working towards this, right? Brundtland's report to define sustainable development is absolutely right. And so hence, this is the first time, of course, it is also the Brundtland report, but it is the United Nations Environment Program's World Conservation Strategy, which for the first time mentioned sustainable development, also defined it, right? Okay. फिर इसके बाद आ गया 1987, the world adopts the Montreal Protocol and we said that we are going to work towards ozone layer depletion and we are going to work towards the conservation of the ozone layer. Then is 1988, the IPCC, जिसका 6th assessment report के बारे में हमने अभी बात की थी पिछले वाले सेशन में. सो इधर तो हम लोग यही पता करते हैं कि मतलब असेसमेंट कैसी है, कि किस तरीके से हमारी प्रॉब्लम्स चल रही हैं, कितनी ग्लोबल एमिशंस हो रही हैं और हमें कैसे इसको रिड्यूस करने की जरूरत है. सो असेसमेंट रिपोर्ट्स आर what is important with respect to IPCC. Apart from that, the latest report in which the UN Secretary General has called a code red for humanity, wherein they have said that, listen, global heating, this is affecting each and every region on the earth, and climate change is going to become irreversible in certain areas. At least जहां पे हम इसको stop कर सकते हैं या ठीक कर सकते हैं, वहां पे हमें करना चाहिए. फिर आ गया आपका ग्लोबल एनवायरमेंट फैसिलिटी इन्वेस्टिंग इन आवर प्लैनेट. नाउ दिस वाज बेसिकली लॉन्च्ड इन 1991 एंड दिस इज अ पार्टनरशिप बिटवीन UNEP, द वर्ल्ड बैंक, UNDP, and it was launched on the eve of Rio Earth Summit. And again, there are a lot of member countries over here who are coming together and they are talking about the environmental problems and also financing this particular thing. And financing wala factor becomes very important because we are talking about a damage fund, which we will talk about in this particular session itself. But global environment facility that has 184 member countries, wherein they have given money to each other so as to make sure that the environmental problems are taken care of. This was started in 1991. Then is your UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. The convention happened in 1992. Entered into force in 1995, and it was extended with the Kyoto Protocol, which was adopted in 1997. Now, UN Convention to Combat Desertification is something that we will deal with थोड़ी देर में. इधर भी हम लोग बात कर लेते हैं. All of this that I have taken, where have I taken this from? I've taken this from the official website of United Nations Environment Program. आराम से जाके उधर जाके देख लेना. बहुत सारी और चीजें भी उसमें लिखी हुई हैं because they are talking about the milestones, 50 milestones that they have in these 50 years. But I've picked out the ones that I consider the most important. In case you want to read more, you have the time to do that. You please go and check it out. It has been taken verbatim from the official website. So states have adopted the UN Convention to Combat Desertification. Right, this was done in 1994, and desertification is basically जहाँ पे बहुत ज्यादा मतलब लैंड मैनेजमेंट ढंग से नहीं हो पा रही है, सॉइल मैनेजमेंट ढंग से नहीं हो रही है, एंड इसके बारे में थोड़ा सा और हम बात करेंगे, बट अ लिटिल लेटर. राइट, yes. Then is your first global environment outlook. So UNEP releases the first global environment outlook in 1997, which is presenting a clear assessment of the state of environment, and it will outline the most important challenges, the biggest challenges that are faced by the planet today. As well, 5 years in meeting in Rio, member states reviewed the state of environment at Earth Summit +5 in New York. So we just need to know कि सबसे पहली बार ये global environment outlook कब आया, तो 1997 में. Rotterdam Convention is the next, which happened in 1998, wherein developing countries were told to make very informed decisions with respect to pesticides and industrial chemicals. And industrial chemicals and pesticides, of course, they are very dangerous pollutants, is something that we are dealing with even today. So we are talking about our fertilizers, we are talking about better pesticides, and we are also utilizing the Central Pollution Control Board and the State Pollution Control Board to tell us which are the chemicals that we can utilize. MC Mehta, known as the green lawyer, or MC Mehta versus Union of India, is something that you've read many, many times, wherein they had asked a lot of industries to go away from highly inhabited areas to be on the outskirts so that, people are not impacted by those industrial chemicals. And we also have rules and regulation as to how to dispose of these industrial chemicals. And in case people don't, we also take very, very strong steps against them. Then is the year 2000, wherein this declaration outlines the Millennium Development Goals. तो आज की डेट पे जिसको हम Sustainable Development Goals बोल रहे हैं, पहले इनिशियली हमने जो बोला था oil and gas leak case, correct, श्रीराम फूड एंड फर्टिलाइजर्स लिमिटेड, So Millennium Development Goals हम लोगों ने initiate किए, जहाँ पे eradicating extreme poverty and hunger, achieve universal primary education, gender equality, empowerment of the women, reducing the child mortality, improvement of the maternal health, combating HIV, malaria and other diseases, environmental sustainability, global partnership, which has now become 17 sustainable development goals. आप सोच रहे होंगे मैम 17 तो लर्न नहीं किए आपने, ये और पकड़ा दिए, तो इनको लर्न करने की जरूरत नहीं है, बट एटलीस्ट नो इट कि कब ये चीज आई, लेकिन 17 सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट गोल्स प्लीज लर्न कर लीजिएगा, ठीक है. देन इज 2001 द स्टॉकहोम कन्वेंशन ऑन परसिस्टेंट ऑर्गेनिक पोल्यूटेंट्स. यू सी दिस ट्रीटी आल्सो प्रोटेक्ट्स ह्यूमन हेल्थ एंड एनवायरनमेंट फ्रॉम डेंजरस एंड लॉन्ग लास्टिंग केमिकल्स by ultimately eliminating and initially mitigating the use of the production and trade of these chemicals, and ultimately just completely eliminating this from our country and our world. And it entered into force in 2004. Then 2005 की अगर हम बात करें, UN का highest environmental honor, which is basically saying this is champion of the earth award. This is given to certain people. Now, if you talk about 2022, this particular champions of the earth award has been given to the Indian wildlife biologist, Dr. Purnima Devi Burman. Okay, please keep her name in mind. And she's an Indian wildlife biologist, and she has been very recently awarded the Champions of the Earth Award. Naam se pata chal raha hai, this is given to those private sector individuals or a civil society organization which has taken a very good step with respect to environmental protection. And she has done the same. That is why she's got this UN's highest environmental honor. She's from Assam. Then is 2006, the World Migratory Bird Day begins in 2006, right? And it is basically celebrated on the second Saturday in May and second Saturday in October. This year, it was celebrated on 14th May and 8th October 2022. And the theme is light pollution, because we have to take care of these migratory birds, and we have to make sure that public awareness is also created with respect to them. 2007 में IPCC created by UNEP and the World Meteorological Organization, this was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. Okay, because of the fact that they come up with these assessment reports. कोई assess नहीं करेगा तो we will not be able to plan and make policies as to how to combat the issues, and so hence they were given the Nobel Peace Prize for it. Then is first emission gap report. जैसे अभी हम लोगों ने शुरुआत में emission gap report से शुरू किया था. So the first one was made in 2010. Apart from that, in 2014, officials, they united for the first UN Environment Assembly, right? Biannual event hota hai, convened by the United Nations Environment Program. Again, it's like a dialogue between different countries wherein they come and they talk about what they have done for the environment and what they ought to do for the environment. It has a near universal membership of 193 member countries. And 2015, बहुत बार कर लिया, Paris Climate Change Agreement, right? And it was done in COP21, and it was considered to be a landmark climate agreement, wherein 195 countries, they adopted the world's first universal and legally binding global climate deal. Okay, and 2 degree, 1.5 degree, I don't think I need to focus on it anymore because we've done that. 2015, so 2000 में हमने Millennium Development Goals की बात की. They failed. Why? Because they were not talking about complete eradication of things, and they were not even looking at each and every perspective in great detail. But in 2015, we came up with these 17 goals, and I hope the governments can work towards it all over the world so that we, in fact, do this properly. Then is 2016, Eric Solheim. अब इनका नाम हम क्यों learn कर रहे हैं? He was appointed as the executive director, that's fine. But during his tenure, he champions the action to tackle plastic pollution. And because, single-use plastic ban is something which is in the news, so I thought I should tell you this also. Just keep it in mind, right? And Inga Anderson, तो आपने बता ही दिया है मेरे को इसके बारे में, तो that is fine. That is something that we already know, and so hence we can go ahead. Now, Apart from that, in 2019, United Nations Environment Program, they launched the inaugural Environmental Rule of Law report. Now, this Rule of Law report is talking about what we need to do and what we are doing right now and the gap between it. And what do we have to do? We have to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And the gap is seen, and it is seen कि अच्छा आप कैसे laws बना रहे हो अपने domestic jurisprudence में and किस तरीके से उसको implement कर रहे हो ताकि वो gap थोड़ा और reduce होता रहे. So that is the Environmental Rule of Law report. Back in 2019, this was made for the first time by UNEP. Then is 2020, the United Nations holds the first International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies, right? So 7th September was declared as the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. Now, why are we talking about the United Nations General Assembly when we are talking about the UNEP? Or why does UNEP have it on their official website? Because it is an agency of the United Nations, and this is the reason why the United Nations General Assembly is even talking about something like that. And so the theme for 2022, 7 September, International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies, is the air we share. Okay, this is rather simple. In 2020, the Secretary General makes State of the Planet address. So on 2nd December, Antonio Guterres made a landmark speech on the state of the planet. And they said, how we need to make sure that we make peace with our nature so that, and what is our task for the 21st century so that we leave something for our future generations. So that's 2020. 2021 May, Making Peace with Nature report. So 2020 May, we made an announcement that we are going to make peace with the nature. And in 2021, we released the Making Peace with Nature report, which is basically giving a scientific blueprint on how to tackle the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. So something like, what is the triple planetary crisis as opined by the United Nations Environment Program? So this includes your climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, these three. Then is 2021 से लेके 2030 तक हमने UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration को launch किया. So World Environment Day 2021 में we started talking about this, and we said 2030 तक, which is also the deadline for Sustainable Development Goals. ये अलग बात है that in the previous year in the United Nations General Assembly meeting, they said, the way the world is heading, ये Sustainable Development Goals की deadline 2030 क्या 2047 तक भी नहीं, we will not be able to meet it. But never say never. Let's start today. If it is not 2030, could be 2031, but at least we need to start today. So in the same way, the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration was also launched, and keeping in mind the Sustainable Development Goals, अगर SDGs हो जाएंगे तो ecosystem अपने आप restore हो जाएगा. एंड रिवर्स कर पाएंगे हम कुछ जो इरिवर्सिबल पार्ट्स है, कुछ तो इरिवर्सिबल पार्ट्स है उनको हम टच नहीं कर पाएंगे, बट जो रिवर्सिबल इश्यूज है उनको एटलीस्ट हम ठीक कर सकते हैं in this particular decade. And then the UN Ocean Decade begins in 2021, so formally known as the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. You see, now I can put 2 and 2 together. Now I can see why National Institute of Ocean Technology is everywhere, isn't it? That is because of the fact that we have this UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. Can you put 2 and 2 together, everyone? Yes. And so hence, whatever is happening at the global level, we try to at least match up to that. We make those kind of organizations. I'm not saying NIOT is made today. Of course, it was made in 1993. But we see that NIOT, it is really working hard towards maintaining our either legally binding or not legally binding convictions of our country. Whatever we have said, we need to do it in our country. So hence, these organizations become very important for us. Then is production of leaded fuel ends. This happened in 2021, which is very good for us. Then 2021, like I said, we made like a UNEP-led global partnership. And we said, leaded petrol has contaminated our air, dust, soil, water, crops for better part of the century. And so hence now the production should end, and it did end in 2021. And in 2021, on 8th October, the United Nations Human Rights Council recognized for the very first time that having a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is in fact a human right. So that is that about UNEP. Now let's talk about the loss and damage fund. पिछली बार भी बात की थी लॉस एंड डैमेज के बारे में. हमें पता है, हमें आइडिया हो गया है कि डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज को क्या चाहिए डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज से. Developed countries, on the other hand, are like, yeah, we'll help you with schemes and all of that. But there are certain countries who've also pledged to give in some money to certain countries, and we'll deal with that. But now, what is this loss and damage fund? So, a lot of developing countries, they're saying, because of the wrong steps taken by the developed countries in the past, the negative consequences falling on the developing countries. And so we as developing countries, we need some money so as to, get out of this particular problem. So now what is this loss and damage fund? The decision by nations around the world to establish a fund for poor countries. Simple as that. And the talks began 30 years ago. But the biggest achievement, if I may say so, of COP27 is the loss and damage fund. Now, of course, because of this, a lot of heat wave and rising sea levels and a lot of issues are happening. And so now what is the history behind loss and damage fund? So in the early 1990s, there was an alliance of small island states, low-lying coastal and small island countries, which said that please make a loss and damage fund, and so that we can sustain ourselves. However, it is often talked about on the margins of negotiations. You see, they talk about it, they don't talk about it. Rich nations somehow try to quash that idea. They just start saying, no, we'll do X, Y, Z. They never really spoke about how much money and who's going to get that money. But for the first time this year in COP27, it was included as an agenda and it became the centerpiece of discussion, so which is the biggest achievement of COP27. Now, who will fund it? Of course, the developed countries will only fund it, right? So international financial institutions वगैरह भी आ जाएंगे. But you see, a lot of countries, the European Union and the US, they have also said, there are countries who call themselves developing countries, but they are also highly polluting and they are considered to be developing by them only. Now, they also should pay up. अब कौन सी country के बारे में बात हो रही है? Till which date do we have to make notes for current affair? बच्चे, see, I'll tell you what, now Narmada Bachao Andolan and Apiko movement is it happened quite long ago, right, Shubha? So the point is, jitna bhi, jo bhi current mein hai, uska static becomes important. So uske landmarks kar lo. Jaise maine abhi United Nations Environment Program, when I was making this PPT, I just looked at it, and of course, like 50 years have been completed, they will give you more than 50 things that they have done. Do we have to pick out each and every one of them? No. Do we need to learn each and every executive director? No. But at least the first and the last is important. Yes, any organization or any convention that India is a part of, that is important. अब अगर आप भीमा कोरेगांव के बारे में बात करो बेटा, वो तो ब्रिटिश के टाइम की बात हो रही है. So till which date I can't possibly tell you that. But what I can say is whatever is in the current, the static becomes important. Is that okay? Yes, I know it's a very ambiguous statement that I'm making, because you see, for some things, it starts and ends in 2022 if it has been spoken about in 2022. लेकिन अगर loss and damage funds के बारे में बात हुई, तो ये पूछा जा सकता है कि when did this discussion even begin? So it began in 1990s. So that is what I'm talking about. Now, in this particular thing, a lot of developed countries very rightly said, China के बारे में बात कर रहे थे कि भाई तुम खुद को developing country बोलते हो, which is really funny, क्योंकि International Monetary Fund के अंदर तुम्हारी तो SDR के अंदर currency है, तो तुम developing कहाँ से हो गए? और अगर तुम developing भी हो तो तुम pollute तो कर रहे हो ना, अगर pollute कर रहे हो तो पैसा भी दो. Now, China. So China said during the talks, China said money for the new fund should come from developed countries and not from them. वो तो होगा ही, and this is exactly what has been happening in the past so many years. But there is a precedence जहाँ पे China has voluntarily paid for climate funds. and they say हम तब देंगे जब US भी दे देगा. So when the Obama administration, they pledged $3 billion to the Green Climate Fund in 2014. China also paid 3.1 billion dollars for the fund. So I mean, China, US, that keeps happening, right? So more details ki kaun kitna paisa dega will be decided by a committee that will be made, right, which will plan that within a year how much should each country pay up. Now who will get the money? This is rather simple. The developing countries jahan pe climate disasters hue hain, jahan pe bahut issues hue hain. So like Pakistan, which was devastated by floods, right, or Cuba. So we'll talk about these countries and the cost of damages in these countries. So this was an article in the Indian Express, counting the rising cost of climate disasters. So this is with respect to kitna paisa, kitna loss hua hai. So सबसे पहले they have spoken about the California wildfire 2017 to 2018, जिसमें worst was the Tubbs fire in October 2017 and the Camp Fire in November 2018. This is just for you to understand. This is not for you to learn, but you can understand that this was like the highest amount of loss that any country has seen with respect to climatic disasters. So you see the total loss was $328.5 billion. Then there was the Atlantic hurricanes, Harvey, Irma, and Maria, which were in August to September 2017. And the total loss was $297 billion, right? Then is the Australian bushfires 2019 to 2020. And nearly for 11 months, this went on. It affected 80% of the Australians, killed or displaced at least 3 billion animals, right? And so the total loss was $110 billion. Then the Hurricane Ian in Florida, September 2022. More than $100 billion ka loss hua hai, right? Then is Hurricane Ida in August 2021, which hit Louisiana, right? And they brought like heavy rain and flooding to New Jersey and New York. Again, a lot of loss in this. Then the floods in Germany and Belgium, July 2021. Pakistan ke floods in June to August of 2022 because the unusual heat in the Karakoram mountain, right? And that led to the unprecedented glacial melt. And so a lot of loss even for this country. The typhoons Faxai and Hagibis in Japan in August to October 2019, again, a lot of loss, right? Then 9th number pe European heat wave summer 2022. And 10th pe Northwestern US and British Columbia, Canada heat wave of 2021. So you are realizing it's not as if it's just the developing countries, but if you look at the amount of damage that is occurring, तो दिमाग में आता है कि ये फंड होना भी चाहिए. It is a good thing that this fund is coming up, and at least the developed countries can take care of themselves, but the developing countries, they won't be able to do that. And so hence, of course, only one earth at the end of the day. The developed countries ought to start paying up their part of the deal, and they ought to start doing it quickly. And this bickering between countries wherein हम तब पैसा देंगे जब तुम पैसा दोगे, that needs to end. Then is your global shield against climate risk. Now, this is also something which is important, launched on 14th November 2022. This global shield against climate risk initiative was taken for vulnerable 20 countries and by the G7 countries. Now, this was launched on the 27th conference, COP27, right? And it's a social protection and insurance-based finance mechanism wherein they will give aid to certain countries, okay? These G7 countries are saying that हम पैसा देंगे ये vulnerable countries को. अब कितना पैसा देंगे और कौन सी countries को देंगे? So the first to receive the assistance will be Pakistan, Bangladesh, Costa Rica, Fiji, Senegal, Philippines, and Ghana. And the initial contribution for the same will be provided by Germany, Denmark, Ireland, Canada. US is also a part of this initiative, and which will be providing funding to the African Risk Capacity. Okay, it is an insurance and disaster risk solution company. तो इसको पैसा देंगे, वो आगे जाके आगे countries को पैसा देंगे. Now, these G7, of course, we all know it. It is an intergovernmental political forum consisting of 7 most advanced countries of the world, right? European Union is a non-enumerated member because it's a regional organization, of course, right? And the Global Shield is backed by 170 million euros in funding from Germany and 40 million euros from other donors, including Denmark and Ireland. So like I said, these are the countries that they are going to start paying to, and they also include, I mean, first wala jo aapka installment hai, that will be given to Pakistan, Ghana, Fiji and Senegal, and of course after that Costa Rica and Philippines and all the others. Okay, so your global shield against climate risk is also very, very important for us. Now the next one is your United Nations Convention to combat desertification. अब ये particular चीज, this convention, it was established in 1994 to restore our land. It is the only legally binding framework to talk about desertification and the effects of drought. ठीक है, so desertification और drought के जो भी issues हैं उसके ऊपर ये legally binding framework है. 197 parties हैं, 196, of course, including the European Union. Okay, and what are they dealing with? They are based on the principles of participation, partnership and decentralization. कि हम लोग साथ में मिलके mitigate करेंगे ये जो impact of land degradation हो रहा है, so that हम लोग food, shelter provide कर सकें, economic opportunity provide कर सकें to all people. Now, Ibrahim Thai is basically the executive secretary of United Nations Convention to combat desertification. The president is Don Wahi, right? And the 15th session of the Conference of Party of UNCCD, it took place in 2022. And who was addressing it? It was again addressed by who's your Union Environment Minister? Bhupendra Yadav. Ma'am, will the money be directly given to the governments? Wouldn't that possibly entail corruption? See, I'll tell you what. Corruption can happen even when we give the money to a company, Supriya. Even if today I say I'm paying so much money to an NGO because the amount of, the kind of audit mechanisms in an NGO, they differ from a commercial enterprise. So yes, corruption can happen. Now what they are going to do is, it is going to be subject matter oriented. तो अगर हम ये पैसा दे रहे हैं तो हम इस particular चीज के लिए दे रहे हैं, and कल जाके, if I am giving this money and you're utilizing it for something else, the basic thing that I can do is I will tell each and every other country to never provide you with that kind of cash. And you see, these developing countries, climate change is a reality for them. You and I, we are, and it's a good thing, touch wood, that of course we saw the heat wave and everything else, but we are sort of in a better position than many, many other countries. Now think about it this way, जब actually problem हो रहा है, तब भी लोग पैसा तो गड़बड़ कर सकते हैं, पर गड़बड़ करके फिर मिलेगा क्या? So this is subject matter oriented and we will use it like that. There will be audit. जैसे हमारा कंट्रोलर ऑडिटर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया होता है, वैसे हर एक सॉवरेन कंट्री का ऑडिट होता है. देयर इज एक्सटर्नल ऑडिट आल्सो, एंड इन केस वी फील दैट नो, यू आर नॉट यूटिलाइजिंग इट प्रॉपर्ली, देन वी विल नॉट फर्दर प्रोवाइड यू दैट मनी. Will we give it to you in one go? Maybe not. We will give it to you in installments. I mean, that is practically the better way to go about it. जैसे IMF देता है कि पॉलिसी डिसीजन लो, इतना पैसा हम दे रहे हैं, ये वाली प्रॉब्लम है, इतना आपको पैसा चाहिए, यहाँ पे हम दे रहे हैं. अब कल जाके अगर आपने उसकी जगह पे एक मॉन्यूमेंट खड़ा कर दिया एक पॉलिटिशियन के नाम पे और वो पैसा वहां पे यूज कर लिया, then the loss is to your own country. So that is what I'd like to say about it. Is that okay? Yes. So COP15 of United Nations Convention to combat desertification, this took place in 2022. Supriya, is that okay? Did that make sense to you, beta? So Bhupendra Yadav, right, he was the one who addressed everyone, and they said India has made very significant progress in its commitment to 26 million hectare of degraded land, जिसको हम restore करना चाहते हैं by 2030. Who is that guy who's like a guru who comes on each and every YouTube ka channel? He also spoke about soil conservation. I'm forgetting, like, very very famous guru na, I don't know his name. Anyway, so India में भी बहुत सारे different civil society workers, Sadhguru, yeah. So civil society workers are really working towards soil conservation. Okay, yeah. So then is your soil health card. So हम soil health card दे रहे हैं, नाम से पता चल रहा है. This is under the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, नरेंद्र सिंह तोमर. हाँ, correct सदगुरु. So जिसे soil health card पता चल रहा है कि soil की fertility कितनी है and all of that, right? So that is how we are trying to make sure that our soil's health is better. Then we are also talking about reducing the chemical fertilizers. So two things come to mind. One is your One Nation One Fertilizer scheme, and second is PM Pranam. We've done both of them. PM Pranam का कोई additional budgetary support नहीं है, लेकिन जितना भी पैसा मिल रहा है उसको यूज करके हम लोग chemical fertilizers से at least या फिर bio fertilizers को यूज करें, या फिर cow dung या cow urine, which we've already spoken about, which is called zero cost natural farming, or Arth Ganga instead of Namami Gange. So we are doing all of that, right? And UN CCD ka permanent secretariat is in Bonn, Germany. And apart from that, the theme is very, very important: land, life, legacy, from scarcity to prosperity. So that was the theme for this one. And the first conference of parties, it happened in Rome. So that is that from my side. Tomorrow, we are going to talk about the International Solar Alliance and the Coalition of Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. And we'll pick out certain more topics then. And then tomorrow, let's have a little bit of MCQs with whatever we've read with respect to COP27. Is that okay? A child had asked for the Red Plus initiative also. We'll do that tomorrow. Okay, so that is all from my side. If you have a question, kindly ask. Otherwise, let's leave it at that. Let's do our revision and not waste any time. Is that okay, everybody? ठीक है. Chalo, do your revision. Thank you very much. In case you have certain other things, so because now we are doing these sessions with respect to certain topics which may or may not have been done or which require a lot of revision, so you can also talk about the topics that you would like to do, and I'll do that for you. Abhi animals वाली बात बोल दी सुप्रिया ने. उसके अलावा भी अगर कुछ है तो वो मेरे को बता देना. Apart from that, thank you very much. Bye bye. Take care and all the best.